So I'll be honest here, I just don't think... Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. Last time you guys saw the 405, we put these 20-inch Defender wheels on, and those were ultimately a temporary solution. Our goal from the get-go was not to run these 20-inch wheels, but a set of 18s. So we're heading up to the Twin Cities to get our first set of wheels in that experiment. We are on the road about 100 miles into our 500-mile trip. Today, we're going to test the cargo limits of the 405 in comparison to the LR4. We got 4 tires loaded up to drop off on the way, and we were able to squeeze 5 wheels and tires in the back of the 405. Doesn't quite fit as nicely as an LR4. Sure do miss the extra headroom of the LR4 though. A little more difficult than that to get 5 in. You can stack them 3 high in the LR4, or you can stand them upright and get 3 across. And here's our first set of guinea pig wheels and tires. On our little 10-hour round trip, we went ahead and picked up a set of 18-inch Nomad wheels with 265/70/18 tires. These were once again off a new Defender. We also got another pair of spacers, which we don't necessarily need because we have spacers on the LR4, we have spacers on the L405, but having extra sets of spacers laying around isn't the worst thing to have. Now on a V8 Supercharged 405, the problem is not that those wheels and tires have a larger overall diameter. Those are 32.7 inches. These are 32s, and the factories are 30.7. We can make all that clear. The problem is actually these, or more specifically, these. Our wheel to brake caliper clearance is probably less than 0. So the Supercharged V8 model has these massive 6-piston Brembo calipers up front. With 510 horsepower in a big old SUV like this, you definitely need some stopping power to woe it down. Now the calipers are obviously much bigger up front than they are in the rear just having a single piston floating caliper, but our problem lies in the overall diameter. These nubs on this rear caliper stick out further than the front caliper. Now I'm not overly familiar with the newer Defender stuff, but I believe this is a similar problem with the P400s. And to fit 18-inch wheels on the P400s, you use a rear caliper conversion from someone like Lucky 8, which I'm guessing is a smaller unit. And I think if we have to, we could do something similar on here, like stepping down to the V6 Supercharged brakes versus the V8 Supercharged here. But we're gonna physically check the clearance with the wheels we just picked up, because every alloy wheel is gonna be just a bit different in clearance. Each manufacturer is gonna have a different inner barrel design and thickness. I'd say it's a bit tight. You can see where we knocked the brake dust off. The rest of it, we're all clear. And you can see on this wheel, the previous gentleman had these on his P400 and also had a tiny bit of clearance issues. Hard to see in there. We're hitting this little nub sticking out. Now I was debating even showing this on video. What I'm doing here is definitely a do as I say, not as I do. I don't ever recommend modifying brake calipers at all. What I'm doing on the front, I'm not too worried about. The wheel's almost clear. I'm just knocking a tiny bit of the rough casting off. So we're not affecting anything up front. On the rear, we had a little more clearancing to do. Ultimately, I'm gonna take some measurements of this piston in the brake caliper and order a set of V6 Supercharged, the base model HSE rear brakes. I think the answer is V6 rear brakes. We're kind of in a similar dilemma to the new Defender guys, at least the P400 Defender guys that are trying to put 18s on it. They have the option of putting a smaller caliper on, which is a much daintier, seems like the correct word, daintier caliper than the P400. No, I'm just kidding. The caliper is the same size. It just does not have the massive ridge or nub that the factory caliper has. Or there is some write-ups out there on how much you have to shave off the factory P400 calipers to make them clear. And they are essentially doing a similar process to what I'm doing here. But if you got a P400, just put the smaller caliper on. Seems like a much wiser option, and ultimately what I would deem the correct solution to this problem. Back in 2015, do you think there was some engineer at Brembo putting a little extra material on the caliper so 10 years later some guy in Iowa could just grind it right off? Probably not. I guess that makes me the new engineer now. It's for science. I'm one of the most dangerous types of people. I had a scholarship to go to college for engineering. Didn't go. Now we sit here with just enough knowledge to be dangerous. If you look from back here, it just looks like I was polishing my calipers. But we have everything clearanced. The front we didn't even really have to take off much. Those were real close to fitting. And with these being a massive fixed caliper, I believe what we we did up front is just superficial. And I think ultimately we're going to go to the V6 brakes in the back. While exploring that option, I just want to make sure the piston sizes match on the calipers so we don't mess up the brake bias and make everything feel all goofy. And we still have the full clamping power of the massive 6-piston Brembos up front. If you're leaning towards YouTube on how to do something like this, just don't. I'll be honest though, there's just something icky feeling about grinding material off on a brake caliper. The front, not so much. We didn't actually shave a real measurable amount off that. These were close to clearing on their own. Just wanted to give it a little bit of breathing room. And while we have the wheels off, I think we're also going to try out the other set of lift rods that we got from Lucky 8. These are the Proud Rhino 1.5-inch lift. Last go around we put the 1-inch ones in. And being we have a little extra diameter in the new set of wheels we're trying, we'll try out an extra 1/2 inch of height. And it's even easier the second time around. And while we got the wheels off, we are also going to recheck the torque on the spacers. We've got 600-700 miles on them. Everything's good, but it's good to make sure. So I'll be honest here, I just don't think the factory V8 Supercharged rear calipers are a viable option. We clearanced everything enough to free spin with what I'll call an acceptable amount of room on the caliper. But right here, we just can't get around that issue. That's just not gonna fly. It'll take one little piece of debris to get in there and either tweak the bolt, making the brake line leak, or heck, even just catch it, loosen it up, and then you have compromised brakes. No one wants that. We don't wanna be out on the road, on the trail, and have something like that mess up. On the last video when I said I wanted to get 18s on a 405 with the V8 Supercharged, I had a few people tell me that they bolt right up. I'm here to tell you that, at least on this 2015, they don't. The front, I myself am completely comfortable with what we had to do there. That was just kind of a superficial knocking off of some of the casting. The rear just isn't quite something I would run. So what we're gonna do is order some parts. I wish we had the option of just replacing a caliper like the P400. I haven't looked into it yet, but I'm guessing we have to do caliper, hanger, and rotor, so it's gonna be a bit more expensive, but I deem what we're trying to do worth that expense. Good news is we still have the LR4 around to drive while we wait on parts for the 405. That is the frickin' ticket. 1.5-inch lift, almost 33-inch tires, and 18-inch wheels. That right there is the look I had envisioned when I bought the 405. I'm a fan of the extra sidewall, and I actually really like the wheel with less negative space. For me, at least, the big body of the full-size Range Rover requires a more of a full-face wheel. That right there makes me happy. So the saga of an 18-inch wheel on a 5-liter Supercharged Range Rover continues, but I think we are getting closer to what we need to make it happen. But every time we touch this thing, I just kind of fall in love with it. It is not quite as utilitarian and useful as the LR4, but I think it is close. But holy cow, one thing I did not mention earlier, when we did our 500-mile trip to grab these wheels, this thing was showing 24 plus miles to the gallon on the cluster, and we hand calculated out in the mid 22s, 510 horsepower, full-size Range Rover, 22 miles to the gallon. Granted, it was 2-lane highway and we were only doing 65 miles an hour. For reference, I get 14 miles to the gallon on the highway in this thing. I've seen 15 once. Since I didn't mention it earlier, these are Nomad Saharas. 18-inch diameter, 8-inch width with a plus 44 offset, and we have a 30mm spacer, making it an effective plus 14 offset. We have a 265/70/18, which ends up being like 32.7 inches tall. The fitment is spot on in my book, minus the fact that they just don't work, you know, with the brakes and all. So today was generally a fact-finding mission. I didn't have a whole lot of confidence that the rear calipers would work. I was hoping maybe we'd get lucky, but I wanted to know the amount of space we were working with, because without that knowledge, we'd just be kind of pissing in the wind as to what to do. But I just got off the phone with our buddies over at Lucky 8. You know, that crazy Freelander guy.
Freelander is surprisingly good.
And with the info we gained from shaving the calipers, they were able to come up with a couple different things to try, along with something up front. So stick around for that in the future. We're gonna get these 18-inch wheels on here properly, along with a bunch of other stuff we have planned to push the limits on the 405. I love the LR4, but I'm really falling in love with this guy. With that being said, appreciate you guys watching, appreciate you subscribing. There's gonna be a ton more on this. And we also just heard from Langmuir on this little mess. That is our CNC press brake that has not been functioning correctly. So we got some things to try and hopefully get this guy working along with everything else on the metal fab side. But that will be the next video. So that's out. That's empty. Still need to get the thing out of the inside. That's going over there. There it is. Also found a million little yellow jackets. And I would say there went the majority of our scrap value.